Um, well, thank you for having us, and thanks everybody at Tupper Museums and having a special you. Also all the tech team that helped us set up our installation. We know that there's a lot of strings to be tied, so we appreciate all the help you gave us. So we wanted to start with what you see over here is the output of the program that actually runs most of our installations. Actually make it do stuff. So right now there's a video camera in my computer, so if I move, it does that. If I move it, it's all kinds of fun. But basically, I wanted you to, we wanted you to see it because it's going to make understanding the video documentation that we have of our other work. Yeah, it's much easier to understand.
Because our work is all based off this program that Chris.
Right. Yeah. So, I spent the last 3 years writing this program, or 4 years writing this program, and 6 months of those, it was in a completely unshowable state. So yeah, programming is fun.
So as Harry said, we come from completely different backgrounds, and our collaboration happened very naturally. We knew each other for about a year before. We had separate practices, which I still try to carry on with mine. And Chris was working on this program, as we said, and he was just projecting onto architecture, onto two-dimensional planes. And I was like, why don't you project on a three-dimensional string and see what happens? And this has kind of been this conversation for the last 3.5 years.
Right. So, and this light that you see is actually the first test object that we projected on, and it was this small assemblage or sculpture that Annika put together, and it was made of elastic. We just put a couple of loops around that platform that you see there, and in a wall, and we projected the same white lines that you see on the program output that you just saw a few minutes ago. And basically that just spawned a whole series of works that we're still exploring to this day, as Annika said. The first series we want to talk about is the nervous structure series. And the nervous structure series are typically string-based or linear, sort of like line-based structures that are typically assembled in the corner of the gallery or museum or space that they happen to be exhibited in. So they all tend to be very site-specific, and they tend to be, again, sized for whatever space they actually happen to be exhibited in. A quick overview of the overall plan of these pieces. Here the dimensions, they're not necessarily representative of all of them, but what you see is basically a structure that's in the corner, and then a projector that's illuminating that corner. And as you see, the projector is not at all perpendicular to the walls as you typically use projectors. And that's kind of one of the constants of our work, that we try to use projectors as a constituent material of the installations.
And we work site-specifically, so we're constantly designing these pieces for the space or around the space.
Mm-hmm. You can go ahead and play, right? Maybe? Yeah, there you go.
So the other component to our work is this interactive. Both of us, again, from our previous practices, we're always really interested in the way that the viewer would interact with our artwork. And this is another continuation into this work.
Right, and so the interaction works sort of similarly to the way that I've demonstrated it previously on the program. There's a camera, and in that case, that's pretty funny. There's a camera actually over here in this case, and the camera's just surveying the scene, and it feeds the program I wrote, and then basically the program tries to figure out where things are moving to and from, and so what it tries to do is just kind of extrapolate forces from your movements, and then add those forces to the lines, which are sort of simulated as a kind of a series of connected springs in a physical or a physics engine, a physics simulation. So we've iterated the concept in various formal ways. all of the pieces act in similar ways, and the configurations are sort of similar, but formally, again, every piece is different because every site is different. And then, of course, we just feel like trying out new things. What's funny about working site specifically, as opposed to, say, as a sculptor or a painter, is that sort of the exhibition space sort of ends up being your studio, if you will. So we've tried out a few new things more than a few times during exhibitions. So
yeah, with this wall, as you can tell, there was, besides one corner, there's a bunch of other angles too, is where you're getting this different shadow from the light. And
yeah, and in this particular case, it was quite nice that this, for whatever reason, this wall has about, what is it, 1, 2, 3 corners in the corner. I mean, that in itself could be a sculpture. But of course, you project light on top of, on that type of surface, and you're going to get this zigzag pattern. So again, I mean, the idea is to just let projectors do what projectors do, and that's what they do. They just, wrap light around any kind of surface that you project on. Again, just still talking about the idea of iteration here, and in fact, that's something that we'll just keep mentioning over and over in the talk.
Yeah, because repeat is really important.
Right.
Well, in our process.
Yeah.
and in both of our mediums too. There's this constant, Yeah,
there's this idea of repetition. I mean, that's sort of natural to both fiber artwork and also the work in textiles, but also in computer-based work. Of course, what's funny is that the computer is designed for you to avoid repetition, right? So, I mean, actually, for me, coming to work into what I call Anika mode, like in the fiber mode, where there is so much labor involved, where everything's so repetitive. I mean, for me, it was kind of interesting because it was such. I guess it's not video. Because for me, it was it was such a different way of working. Anyways, this nerve structure 5, and the next couple of
So before we were exploring it with just elastic string, these were tubes out of spandex that I was sewing and we're stretching them across. We're still getting this kind of neon tube light feeling where we're kind of transforming the materials, let alone again using light as a material to be able to transform the materials.
So yeah, this is actually like an earlier version of the software. So the way that the software engages with you is somewhat more subtle and perhaps less direct. It still has its own, I guess it has its own personality.
It's something about repeat, right? Too, because we're constantly learning as we're repeating, these pieces over and over again. We're refining them.
Yeah, and something. I mean, I don't know if there's many people in the audience here that work with new media or software-based art, but it's typical for new media programs and for practitioners of new media to make new things. Every time they want to start a project, and that's just something that always really irked me. I didn't want to start something new. I just wanted to keep refining what I had. So working in this mode, and especially working with Anika in this mode, really it has been actually rather freeing. You're able to work both as I'm able to work as in the new media mode as a programmer, but also together we're able to work in a more traditional way, like a sculptor or a painter or a more traditional artist. I know a couple of iterations of the span-based versions of nervous structure, and one final one that also integrates sort of that new software that it's actually the same or very similar to what runs the piece over here at Telfair. Okay. So the next series that we want to talk about is called Notional Field, of which the piece that it's actually exhibited upstairs a part of. So Notional Field is, again, it's a similar idea. We have strings, we have projections, and we have lines, and we have interaction. Here, what we've focused on is the creation of very strong moire patterns. And so we actually want to talk a little bit about the idea of moire patterns.
And this is something that we are constantly kind of finding out as we're exploring and making is how much our mediums are crossover. The moire is, two pieces of fabric that come together and you get that moire effect, or it's printed like a watermark, and then moire is also something that happens in computer graphics, is like this after effect.
Right, this is well, the moire effect is just basically two planes which intersect and interfere with one another. And I have a funny little moire app, but yeah, I guess we don't. So I mean, for me, it always meant, these things are interfering with one another. These two grids are interfering with one another. I had no idea actually that the moire effect, the word itself, actually had its origins in textiles, and so it's actually quite an old word. It comes from the Arabic, and it meant to have a watered effect. So it's interesting because we were constantly discovering how both textiles and the fiber world share this language also with the computer, both hardware and software. I mean, the idea of moire, but also the idea of a machine that's programmable. The first programmable machine is a loom. So there's these constant connections both in terms of intent, but also in terms of language and metaphor that the computer, the technology world has actually borrowed from the textile world. So this idea of the moire has kind of led us to explore sort of or our historical past.
Yeah, I think for us, we reference the past a lot, and kind of bringing them present with technology is something that we're really interested in and exploring within our work. And one of that is op art and this optical illusion aspect of.
And the interesting thing about op art, at least for us, is that of course the optical effect, etc. But op art really requires your participation as a viewer, right? I mean, it is when you are actually viewing the work that the work itself becomes activated and sort of starts living in that in-between space of seeing or perceiving and understanding, right? So Bridget Riley actually has been, for us, it's been really interesting to revisit her work, especially as we've moved forward with more optically, more optically dominated work, I guess, if you want to put it in some way. And also other references or other artists that have inspired us and that we've gone back to are, for instance, Carlos Cruz Diaz. I'm from Venezuela. I'm originally from Caracas. And Carlos Cruz Diaz, he's a still active, kinetic, and I guess sort of op artist. And he's been active since the early to mid 20th century till now, and a lot of his work has dealt with again this idea of effect and perception and how the image interacts or interferes with our perceptual apparatus. And again, for me as a Venezuelan, has been a really important both influence and well, it's, I guess influence really. And another influence, which is also a Venezuelan artist, is Jesus Soto. And Jesus Soto, who was also active in a similar period, although now he has passed. He also worked with the idea of interference. So typically he had works that had grids and there were objects in front of the background grid. And here the idea of participation becomes even more obvious because as a viewer, you were required really to move around the object to really perceive what was going on or perceive how the object was changing depending on your changing your perspective. And finally, this is one of Jesus Soto's penetrables, which is perhaps what he's best well known for. And it's truly interactive work. It's just a grid of material that you're supposed to go right into, and you both experience it aesthetically and its physical perception itself. So this is actually the first version of Notional Field. which, again, as you're seeing the difference in configuration here, now we're talking about a great many number of parallel lines that are flat on the wall, and of course there's a lot many more projected lines.
And the way that the moray is being created is we have the physical line, and then we're using the projector again as light, and it's being projected onto the line, and as the viewer moves is where the moray is created. So it's that inner in between the virtual and the real of where this piece really lives.
Yeah, and so the moray for us is not just an effect that gets created because we're interfering these two grids, the virtual grid and the physical grid, but also it's just become this sort of metaphor for the larger, if you will, goals of our work, which is talk about this sort of emergence that happens when you combine the digital and the physical, or the virtual and the real. When you put those two things in relationship, there's this third thing that just emerges, and that third thing, or that in-betweenness, that's the space that we're most interested in exploring. So this is the detail of, so that you can...
Give you an idea of how these strings are strung.
Right.
And that we're making these structures now. So we did a lot of different versions, and like you said, we worked very site-specifically, so designing the piece for each space that we were going into.
And it's always interesting to see how people interact with the works. We just happened to be with the camera where I think there was a group of dance students that were interacting with the work, and it was really fascinating. I mean, and there's, especially when you're talking about dancers, they have such sense of their bodies, and it was really just quite a treat actually to see them interact.
Yeah, it's nice to watch because we're constantly learning too. I think.
So one part, yeah, you go ahead.
The other aspect to it is labor, and the behind-the-scenes labor. Behind-the-scenes as a fiber artist for me, where it's this constant repeat, and then same with code, where it's just like there's a lot of labor, but it's all behind.
Yeah, but this idea of the repeat, of course, that you know, it is so much of, you know, of this the physical part of the world, and that's sort of what computers have abstracted, and that's what I was saying before, right? So the computer's a repeating machine, and that's all it does. I mean, basically, you can think of computers as machines that run on a loop, and in fact, all programs that you run, they're just basically running on a loop. They're just basically asking the same questions over and over and over again, and see if any of the answers have changed. Of course, that's pretty much impossible to do in the real world unless you have robots, but you know, you can become the robot, right? And that's what typically how things got built, right? With people just doing things repeatedly, and that's just something that is interestingly has definitely been, or is definitely on the way out on Western or post-industrial societies.
So I'm still playing with the same idea, and then we realized that if we put black behind it, we can get more color, and the color is all happening from the projection.
Yeah, so I mean, of course, this is sort of like partly accidental color theory. Oh yeah, if you make a background much darker than the foreground, you're going to get this very interesting high contrast effect in your perception. But also, if you go back for a moment. So you see, so you see the color that you see in this slide. What's interesting about this color, and this is something that we discovered. We didn't set out to exactly do that, but and this is the fun thing about constantly working, is that that color is actually happening. You'll see it in person when you experience the work. And the reason the color appears is because the projector light, as it's coming around the elastic cores, the light sort of diffracts a little bit, and then when it diffracts, the projector sort of decomposes into its constituent colors. And then all projectors do it in a slightly different way. So you end up getting slightly different looks for all the pieces in which you use different projectors for.
Which is really exciting for us because, again, we're talking about light as a medium.
And projectors as a medium.
Projectors as a medium, code as medium, and kind of a...
Yeah, and just letting these students do what they naturally want to do. So for us, it was a very exciting discovery, and we just kept trying to take advantage of it. Some more pictures of perhaps bigger work, but now also pictures of smaller work. And in this particular piece, it's called Double Interference. We were actually invited to a show in which they were given we were given handmade paper, and we just thought, well, you know, somebody's going to give us handmade paper. Maybe we should just like put this through some kind of digital process to see what happens. And so we got the handmade paper laser cut with this double interfering pattern that we then projected on, and you got something that's in effect very similar to what's over here. So we've started to also experiment with the idea of non-interactive work, and of course, you know, for anybody that doesn't work interactively, well, yeah, that's most work is non-interactive. But for us, it's just been, you know, this new, I guess, place of discovery. So we're taking some of the same ideas, but instead running software-based animations over the structures that we're projecting on. A lot of our work, a lot of the images that our work is based on, again, they're all software generated. So these, even though they look like animations, it's very important that they're running on a computer on a real-time basis, so that they're basically just generated on the fly.
So again, we're just taking this idea and pushing it shape-wise and...
Yeah, and form-wise, but it's still, you know, we're still working with the same ideas. I mean, it's why not work as a painter, but instead with a computer, right? I don't have any problem with that. I mean, I can just do the same 3 things the rest of my life. And if people are still interested, I'll keep doing them. You know, I mean, why not? We've also kind of done the sort of almost the you know, the most reduced version of all of these ideas, which yeah, we call possible polygon. It's just but what's funny about this is it's kind of like it's a little bit of a pun, if you will, or a little bit of a one-liner. No pun intended. Because there's only one line. But what's funny is of course you're projecting one line, right? But if you project it in a corner, what you end up is with 2 lines, or you perceive 2 lines, right, or a broken line. But then there is a line that's connecting those 2 potential points. So there's at one point that animation is just going to illuminate the line perfectly so that you perceive this triangle. But there's just that one possibility out of very many. And then the last
piece. So then, again, using the same ideas moving forward, because we're running out of time, we wanted more from our pieces. So we collaborated with our friend who's a sound artist and brought an interactive sound component into these recent pieces.
So this piece is it's called Transposition, and this was actually exhibited at the Denver Art Museum. And, yeah, the space is really that cranky. It's a Daniel Epstein building. It's kind of just very out of space.
Again, we talk about the virtual and the real, and you know, it's a very tactile piece, but it's not. You're not supposed to touch it, right? But you're still touching it as you're moving because you're controlling it. And then that's why we wanted to bring the sound in to add on to another layer to it.
Yeah, but it's you know, we're bringing in the sound to just bring this sort of corporeal feel to something that's essentially an incorporeal interface. It's an invisible interface that still engages your body. So for us, there was always a gap that was left. We feel that the gap is closed once, or as closed in this very synthetic way, once we add this interactive sound system. It's really, you know, it's almost overpowering, and it just completely kind of envelopes you.
Shots of it. Doing this big backdrop where the camera was on the conductor, so he was actually controlling the backdrop.
Well, we were modifying the settings of the software so they were better reactive.
Just shown in France in Paris, where it's called Standing Wave,
Yeah, and so standing wave, the idea was, obviously you're seeing these two curved surfaces that of course kind of look like a wave, and they're covered with sound absorbing film, which you see on the left. But the idea was also to make a reference to both the physical phenomena that has the same name, but also to pay homage, if you will, to Naum Gabo, who did a piece that was titled similarly, and he used to talk about the idea of virtual volumes with a piece of wire that just vibrated. So just thought, what a better way to no better way to name this piece that complicates this relationship between physical and virtual.
This one, the sound really had, it was physical. Like the room was shaking, which is what we wanted for the viewer to even be able to experience it even more.
Right. This moire pattern because you're getting, we're projecting over still what's essentially a regular grid with these serrated edges from the sound absorbing film. Remembering or reminding yourself that that just because something's been done doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to do it as well, and just because you did something doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that it isn't worth redoing. I think that the idea of iteration is a very powerful one, and in the current world it's just very easy to just keep throwing out new ideas, and see what sticks. And there is something valuable in just taking a simple idea and just keep working at it, and just keep working at it, and keep working at it until it becomes precisely what you want. And that just takes time. So I think that what we would suggest to you is just take your time. But anyways, that's all the time we have. So thank you.